It is possible that 2025 will be one of the biggest years of the One Piece franchise. For the next year in the manga, we are set up to see some of the longest build-up moments in the entire series. But One Piece even outside the manga could also be really huge, where the anime will make its return in April, with its depiction of the Egghead arc's climax, and later in the year, we will see the second season of Netflix's One Piece live action. There is also a lot of potential for the long-awaited One Piece anime remake to be released within the next year. Before I get to any of these things though, let me explain what I think will be the number one biggest thing about One Piece in 2025. I think it is very likely that this year, after decades of build-up, will finally show the fight between Shanks and Blackbeard in the manga, and that it will actually happen at the beginning of the year. My reason for this prediction is that this is likely a fight Eiichiro Oda had originally planned for 2024. Almost exactly 1 year ago, Oda said that 2024 would see a long-anticipated fight between two characters in the manga. Due to unexpected breaks, however, we never got to see this fight, but it is very likely that it will still happen, and that it simply got pushed back to next year. This is because this would not be the first time something like this happened, where for example, Oda also promised the start of the Wano arc for 2017, yet even though it did not happen in 2017, it simply got delayed to 2018. I am personally very confident in the prediction that the fight Oda is referring to here is indeed Shanks vs Blackbeard, as this is something that can be deduced through a simple process of elimination. Oda's exact words are that this is a long-anticipated fight, and there genuinely are not that many fights in One Piece that would fit this description that would currently happen other than Shanks vs Blackbeard. This is because every other anticipated fight in the story involves the Straw Hat crew. These include fights such as Luffy vs Shanks, Luffy vs Blackbeard, Zoro vs Mihawk, or Usopp vs Van Ogre. It is very unlikely for any of these fights to happen in the near future, however, due to the simple fact that none of the Straw Hats' opponents are currently on Elbaf. While it is possible that some of them could suddenly come to Elbaf, I do not think this is likely, as the Elbaf arc is currently heavily focusing on the Straw Hats slowly exploring the land of the giants. If a long-anticipated fight is to happen in the near future, and if it is not going to involve the Straw Hats, I genuinely think the fight Oda has to be talking about is Shanks vs Blackbeard. If I am actually correct, this could very well be one of the moments that would elevate the entire One Piece franchise, just like something like Year 5 did in Wano. Shanks is pretty much the most built-up character in all of One Piece, and frequently performs very well in things like popularity polls and viral One Piece videos. A big reason for this is that Shanks is someone pretty much everyone knows, and he's been a part of the story since the very beginning. This means that there are millions upon millions of people who once upon a time read or watched One Piece, but are not caught up to the series, yet they still remember and are interested in Shanks, and they would immediately return to the story if they found out that Shanks is finally doing stuff. A perfect example of this effect Shanks has on the masses is Film Red, where the entire marketing around the movie was based around it being the Shanks film, and Film Red ended up outperforming every other One Piece movie several times over. If the masses hear that Shanks vs Blackbeard is finally happening in the manga, it would very much be the same kind of huge moment for the franchise. It would essentially follow the same logic as to why Gear 5 was such a huge moment, where just like the Gomu Gomu no Mi, Shanks' character is one of the aspects of the One Piece story literally every fan knows about. However, even if Shanks vs Blackbeard does end up going down in 2025, it would very likely not be the only huge One Piece manga moment of the year. This is very simply because we are currently in the Final Saga. As already showcased in the Egghead arc, the thing that truly makes the Final Saga of One Piece special is that the story is following events all over the world, and is not just focusing on the Straw Hats. The The Egghead arc also left us with some pretty big setup for next year, where just to name the biggest, Dragon now knows about Emu's existence and plans to finally end things with the world government. Blackbeard is about to find out where not just one, but two of the ancient weapons are located, and Bucky and the Cross Guild are also making their move for the One Piece. What this means is that it is not at all unlikely that the manga in 2025 would show some decades build-up moments, like us finally seeing Dragon or Mihawk having a full fight, or ancient weapon Pluton being awakened. I am not necessarily saying that all these moments will happen next year, but at the same time, because we have a whole year ahead of us, it is very likely that these storylines that are currently happening outside Elbaf will see some major developments in 2025. Aside from the manga, the One Piece franchise as a whole has a lot of content coming out next year. The first and foremost is the return of the anime in April, where it will continue adapting the Egghead arc. This current break is fairly unprecedented, as it is the longest break the One Piece anime has ever had since it first began 25 years ago. The break, however, does not mean that the team behind the anime is simply taking a vacation, and by their own words, the reason for this break is to improve the quality of the anime. In practice, this likely means that the studio is putting a lot of effort into the big moments of the Egghead arc's second half, such as Luffy's fight with Kizaru and the Elders, Kuma's flashback, or Joy Boy's Conqueror's Haki Blast. These big anime moments have become a cornerstone of the One Piece media ecosystem, where clips like Shanks beating Kid or Garp attacking Pirate Island are actual viral videos, raking in millions of views on YouTube. Even something like the clip of Kobe's Honesty Impact has 2 million views and over 40,000 likes, which for the sake of transparency is more than my entire channel, 2 times over. Hold on, that actually is not Kobe's Honesty Impact, but this very video. I think I'll take this opportunity to give myself a like. I hope you do so as well. I'd personally expect something like Luffy's fight with Kizaru or the Five Elders' arrival to essentially be guaranteed viral hits if they are well animated. Kizaru and the Gorosei are once again characters most fans are aware of, which as talked about before with Shanks, means that a lot of old fans will tune in to see them in action. If the manga and anime having a potentially huge year was however not enough for you, 2025 is also set to be the year when Season 2 of One Piece live action will be released. The first season was essentially the most successful live action manga adaptation ever made, and it is also one of the most popular shows Netflix has ever produced. Just to give you some perspective on how much global reach the live action gave the One Piece franchise, on Google Trends, One Piece's peak is at the time when the first season of Netflix's One Piece was released in the fall of 2023, surpassing even the previous peaks of Gear 5th and One Piece Film Red. Clearly, it will be extremely hard for the second season to surpass the first season, at least commercially. As long as the season still delivers on quality, however, it should still be a huge plus for the franchise, to say the least. And just like I talked about earlier with the anime clips serving as viral videos for the series, this same thing happened in 2023 with the live action. For example, the clip of the live action fight between Zoro and Mihawk has more views than any Egghead anime clip that I've been able to find. The live action could very much repeat this in 2025, with the second season covering scenes like Dragon's introduction or Luffy's fight with Zoro. And really, considering that the series is willing to break away from the manga, who knows what Netflix could do with characters like Smoker and Crocodile in the second season. One Piece live action is also not the only One Piece project Netflix is currently working on. There is also The One Piece, a full-blown anime remake of the manga announced back in 2023. Even though it has already been a whole year since the original announcement, we have not gotten much information on this project, other than a few images, and the fact that it is done by Studio Wit, which is the same studio behind anime like Attack on Titan and Vinland Saga. Herein also lies the clue why we may already end up seeing the One Piece in 2025. This is because looking back at the previous anime that have been made by Studio Wit, it usually takes 1 to 2 years after their announcement for the season to be released. Since the One Piece was announced in December of 2023, it is thus very likely that we will actually get to see it in 2025, simply based on Studio Wit's record. This remake is very clearly done with the main purpose of drawing in new fans to the franchise. The One Piece story has absolutely blown up in popularity over the last 3 years, but the big hindrance for many of these new fans is that it is still hard to start the anime from the beginning, since it is at this point understandably dated for current day standards. If the remake is successful, however, this problem could be altogether solved. This has been the case with a lot of other anime franchises in the past, where series like Hunter x Hunter managed to birth a whole new generation of fans with an anime remake. This is also why Netflix likely wants the One Piece to be released around the same time they are going to release the second season of the live action, as that would undoubtedly bring a huge amount of new fans who would be interested in this remake. However, it is possible that even beyond 2025 being a huge year in the manga, and the year seeing the return of both the anime and the live action, as well as an anime remake, there could be one more huge One Piece related thing coming out next year. One Piece Film Red was originally released in 2022, and before this, we've had a One Piece film released once every 3 to 4 years since the series originally began. Because it has then been 3 years since Red was released, it could be that, on top of everything else coming out in 2025, we'd also be getting a new One Piece film. As we've already brought up in this video, One Piece movies are actually a big factor in the success of the franchise, with Film Red being globally an even bigger moment than Gear 5th according to Google Trends. Many also cite film Strong World as being the big reason why One Piece originally exploded in popularity in the late 2000s. Therefore, in addition to everything else mentioned in this video, 2025 also seeing the release of a new One Piece film could well make this one of the biggest years of the franchise. However, I will have to pull some brakes on the likelihood of this happening. In the past, One Piece films have always been announced over a year in advance before their release. Furthermore, these films are still done by Toei Animation, and with their current half-a-year break from the anime, it could be that they are simply too busy to be working on a new One Piece movie on top of everything else. If you want to be conspiratorial, you could say that maybe they are secretly working on a new movie, and this is part of the reason for the break. But I would personally not put much stock into this. Even without a new movie coming out though, if all goes right, 2025 is still looking like a huge year for One Piece, and it could rival the popularity the franchise reached in 2022 and 2023. Admittedly though, the beginning of the year may still be slow, as the anime is still on a break, and the manga is seemingly taking its time with Elbaf. However, I genuinely think that despite the slow start, the Elbaf arc will contain some of the biggest events in the history of the series. If you are interested, you should click here to watch my video where I break down everything huge that could go down in this arc, and why Elbaf might end up being the single biggest arc in the story. Other than that, thanks a lot for watching this video to the end.